literally COVID hit and it's like, all right, we're working from home. And again, that was our opportunity to work harder than all the other brands. I remember being at home. I took my whole setup. I went home, back to where I started just a year, 6 months before that, right? And I'm there, and everyone that we had was working from home, and we would have meetings every day. Okay, let's data mine, let's find these coaches, these facilities, and then let's reach out to them. Let's contact them and say, hey, I know you guys are shut down. I know it's crazy right now, but just want to let you know we're here when you're ready. When we get back going, we know we're going to get through this. We'll be there. We would just send a message. We would just keep everyone kind of in the loop of what's going on.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thanks for joining me for another episode of Building Pickleball, where I interview company and brand founders to share their story as a founder and their contribution to the fastest growing sport, pickleball. My guest in this episode is Evan Specht. Evan Specht is a co-founder of Diadem. We talk about what it's like starting a business with your friend and former tennis partner, and his background in aerospace engineering and business, and how that played a role in starting a successful business like Diadem. One of my favorite parts of the interview was going over how they reacted to COVID and how they were able to flourish. Now, here's the episode. Hey, Evan, thanks for joining us today. Can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and Diadem?
My name is Evan Specht. I am a tennis player by birth, basically. Converted to pickleball in many ways over the last few years. Um, you know, I started Diadem with a business partner of mine, AJ Bartlett. We met playing professional tournaments in Mexico, actually, for the first time, maybe 15 years ago. And after we kind of finished our playing careers, we both got into coaching. He was more of the general, like, club teaching pro, working with, the average, older lady or young kids, but just kind of just regular lessons. And I went with the high performance junior pro route. So I was working with some high level juniors, some kids that were transitioning into the pro side or college. So we had a little bit different background in our coaching, which then led us both to the same end goal, which is we didn't really want to be in coaching forever, and we wanted to transition into a business side of the sport that we loved. So, we had a lot of experience in both coaching a wide range of players from, like, I was doing more of the high level and he was doing more of the recreational. I coached some in college as well. So we felt that we could create products that, could hit the entire market, wouldn't be specific for just one type of person or one type of player, but that we could really understand what each individual customer would need and to be able to create products for them. And so with our background in playing, coaching, I also went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautic University. So I studied aerospace engineering. So I had a background in engineering and business. We felt that we had a kind of unique opportunity to disrupt the tennis market a little bit. And so that's what we did.
I think sometimes there's a lot of people have like constraints or like rules around business. Like sometimes people don't want to mix business and like family or friends. How did you know that partnering up with AJ, you wouldn't really risk the friendship and that you kind of had that relationship that would thrive into a
Yeah, I mean,
successful
that's
business?
that's a really good question, and I would probably you know also agree with that in many regards. And I mean, obviously there's examples where that works. My parents had a business together and they ran it out of our house, so I heard the yelling, and I also saw the success too. So for us it was a unique situation too, in that we we're friends, and we competed together and all that, but we actually never really, besides a few months, lived around the same area. So I mean, he has been and still is based in California, and I was based in Florida. And so the relationship, while we were friends and we knew each other, and played fantasy basketball together, but like it was still more of a almost a business relationship from the beginning. And so we put what we could put in our work and the initial capital, and we did that, but almost like as business partners from the beginning, because we weren't just like friends growing up together, hanging out, getting a beer. We were always kind of from the early onset, thinking about this business and how we could do it, and we each had our own roles early on, which morphed and changed, of course. But so it was kind of a unique situation where sure we were friends, but it was more of a business friendship even from early on.
Yeah. Um, Kind of going back to your background in like aerospace engineering and both how you and AJ have an experience, heavy experience in tennis. From I believe from what I've heard in previous interviews is that you you guys started with the tennis balls
No,
first.
we started with the tennis string first. That was the first product. Yeah.
Okay.
So we actually started developing the tennis string in 2011, and that process for for us, so we didn't know anything about tennis string production. We knew everything there is to know about like what string we liked. We'd strung thousands of rackets, because I did that on the side too. I was stringing rackets before we did all this. But in terms of like how do you design, develop, and produce a string? So I remember like one of the first things I was doing was I would email college professors at schools like Auburn, and I think it was like Caltech, like that were in the monofilament college. Like they had this background and they actually had the machines and the ability to produce it. And what I was able to do is you know use tennis, which is a fun cool thing, and find people that were into tennis. And so a couple of these professors were actually also tennis players, so they were willing to give me advice and information just because I asked for it, and to be a part of the process. And then we were just spending a lot of time trying to source, from nothing, what kind of vendors and factories could produce this. Again, we weren't in the business. We didn't have any inside scoop. We didn't have a sourcing team. So it was literally Google, and you know, obviously it was still in the internet age. I mean, this is only like 2011, but it was a lot different back then. I mean, it was a lot harder to get a hold of a factory in Taiwan then than it is now. So I actually at one point flew over there. I mean, this is before we had a business, before we had anything. I had meetings with them. It's like we actually have a mural on our wall out here, and it has like kind of a timeline of Diadem, and one of the things on the wall is like a banana, because on that trip I literally had a carry-on bag and one shirt, and I put my banana on top when I was sitting there, and it got smashed, and I had banana all over my shirt, for my meeting. It was like ridiculous. So I had to wear a sweater the entire time, trying to act like. And at that time I was pretty young. I mean, I was in my 20s, and they looked at me and like who are you? And I literally lied about my age. I'm like, no, I just look young. I'm 32. I've been doing that, like it was really funny in the beginning, trying to break into this, trying to get people to do things for us without us coming in saying, oh, here's $50,000, let's do this. It was like, hey, do you want to be part of this process? And so for the factories that we worked with early on, that did a lot of prototyping with us, one in Taiwan and one in Germany, they produced monofilament uh, polyester product, right? But not tennis string. So it was an opportunity for them to kind of expand their product line. They were making sutures or window screens and things like that. Like this stuff here on my window, I mean, they're producing that. It's the same material, same machine. So we were able to kind of convince them, like, hey, this is going to be good for your business to expand your market, and it worked. And then we were able to take everything we learned. We ended up going into a kind of a well-known, trusted factory that's been producing our strings from the beginning, with all of the lessons and the prototyping and the designs that we kind of did along the way.
Yeah. So it might seem like it's been like a long time now, but um, I was very interested when you were talking about in the early days, like back in 2011. Absolutely, like things you only had were like things like
Yeah.
Google, and it was very hard to get a hold of businesses. There, it wasn't like a saturated market and things like that. It's like what kind of comes to mind when you think about what made founding a business back then successful? Like, were there certain
Yeah.
traits or characteristics that you all
Yeah, I
did?
think number one, and I tell people all the time, is it's hard work. I mean, luck. I also say luck is a big part of it, but you don't get lucky unless you put yourself in the position to get lucky, and that's in anything. So it could be like, if I hit a forehand that clips the tape and rolls over, well, if I wouldn't have hit a clean ball that direction, if I would have shanked it, it would have went behind me. So I never would have even had that opportunity. So for us in where we've gone, and there's so many steps, so many partners, so many like people along the way, and factories and stuff, that just this like winding road that we took, none of it would have been possible without ridiculous amounts of heart. I don't know how many times I remember, AJ's like getting ready to get on court. I'm on court, and it's just like, yeah, we haven't heard from these guys in 3 weeks, man. It's done. It's like, okay, all right, should we just stop and we're just gonna coach now, And it's like, no, let me try this again. Let me try that. And it was like 3 a.m. emails, 3 a.m. phone calls with Taiwan, just trying to get them on the. I mean, I would call this factory. At one point, we were trying to work with this factory in Colombia, and I would call, and the only phone number I had went to like the factory floor, and it was so loud, and they're speaking Spanish and I don't speak Spanish, and I'm just trying to figure it out. It's like all these things when we were bootstrapping. Again, it's different if you're a company that has a angel investor from the beginning and you're starting with $10 million and you're like, you got these connections and everyone's looking to take your money. For us, it was literally bootstrapping with, just hard work, effort. I don't know how many people from, Tennis Warehouse saying, why would you start a string? Why would you do another string company? Why would you be in tennis? It's the worst market to be in. Why would you do it? To when we were trying to do the balls, you can't make tennis balls? Only Wilson Head Babylon can make tennis balls. You can't do that. Why would you even try? All these ways to just keep pushing. The other thing that's lucky for AJ and I is we're extremely competitive, like ultimately competitive. So I love when someone tells me I can't do something. I mean, that's like I literally have to tell my wife sometimes, no, tell me I can't do this, so then I'll do it. But we have to like do that because it's like, I mean, she could be literally, you're not gonna be able to clean the floor today, right? Like, oh yeah, really? You don't think I can? Like, so just like those kind of things helped us a lot, being athletes, competitive athletes, professional college athletes. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think we're relatively smart, savvy and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's just hard work. Like if I always felt if I was working at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, Wilson's not. I know the head guy at Wilson's not doing. The head guy at Babylon's not doing that. The Gamma guy's not doing that. So I always felt like, hey, if we worked 7 days a week, I can fill the role of 5 people maybe, and that's what we did early on to get it going. And, I mean, obviously we have a pretty large team now, but it's still, we have huge goals and huge aspirations. So we're still working for sure harder than anyone else in the industry, and that's I think a benefit to us, and that's absolutely needed. If you want to start something from scratch with no support, no help, you need to absolutely work harder than anybody.
Yeah, that's funny. Your wife's probably like, you won't watch the kid for like a month
Absolutely.
on
Oh
your
yeah,
own.
like you can't. Yeah, no. I mean, you should. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Like the way I have to work sometimes to just be like, no, tell me I cannot do it. If you tell me I can do it, if you tell me I'm good, then like, what do I need you for? You got to be against me.
Yeah. On that subject, not the watching
Yeah.
your child or things like that, but back to the topic of legacy brands. I think that's a big hesitation a lot of founders have, is like something that comes up immediately is, well, this person's already doing it and they're like doing it with way more capital, way more resources. Like, what kind of went through you and AJ's mind when you're like, there are these legacy brands like Wilson and Head, um, and
Yeah.
kind of like,
I,
how
I,
do you
I think
overcome
a
that?
part of it was like a stepping stone as well. I mean, when we first started and we had string, I mean, of course it would have been cool. I mean, we definitely thought about, oh, it'd be cool to have a racket someday. It'd be cool to have balls. It'd be cool to have this and that. But like, we were just thinking, hey, what can we do with this? What can we do with some string? Can we compete with Solinko? Can we compete with some of the string brands? And as we took step after step after step, then you started having these bigger goals. Now it's like, what can we take from Wilson? What can we take from Babylon? And when we brought on our partner in, I think it was 2020 now, Jeff. And so he's an investor, but also just a shrewd businessman, and his team with Mike Manglardi. So we started to get some support, obviously, and we were started to put in a little bit of money. Most of it's still bootstrapped, but we were able to to have a warehouse and offices, and to be able to grow the business. When we kind of got to that point, one of the first things Jeff saw when we were in discussions about, hey, is this partnership something we're both interested in, is he looked at the brands, the big legacy brands, and saw a lot of flaws in what they were doing. If you notice, what they kind of typically do is from like the top down. They're going to get the pro players, they're going to get the big box stores, and then and the magazine ads, and it flows down. We're more from the bottom up. We work with the coaches, the juniors, the small facilities, the stringers. We love stringers. We love the people that are out there putting a racket, putting string, putting a pickleball paddle in somebody's hand, and saying their experience. Hey, I have a great relationship with Diadem. I like their products. I think this one might be good for you, and if you like it, let's see if we can get you put into it. And so that's kind of the grassroots focus that we've done. At the same time, we hit people pretty aggressively on social media. So we're like kind of both the high tech and the low tech side. What we stay away from is the mass marketing in a TV or you know magazine ad, and we're obviously starting to get some pros, and we have a lot of juniors heading into the pro scene, college players. We like the young and exciting and potential future. What we'll never do is pay somebody that's a millionaire $1 million to use our racket maybe at the twilight of their career or whatever, just to say, hey, we have this guy who maybe, by the way, isn't even using the racket, but using a painted version of the racket like a lot of the pros do. What we like to do is take that $1 million and spread it out to junior players. We do a lot for foundations in pickleball. We give to Tunnels to Towers. We do a lot of donations for tournaments. Like, we like that grassroots. We like to spread it out and build it up on like a wide spread base, as opposed to getting that one, paying Roger Federer $10 million to say this product's good. He doesn't need the money, and although it would be great to have his support, we want people that are actually really excited to use the product, not just using it because we're paying them a lot of money. And that's kind of just been our philosophy. And there's so many people playing tennis, so many people playing pickleball, that there's a lot of growth to happen at that lower levels, at that lower, like, just grassroots, ground floor, just average player. Just somebody that's a 4-0, 4-5, a 3-0, doesn't matter. That just looking to play tennis, and that's who we're concerned about.
Yeah. I was speaking with the founder of Kitsch and then also founder of Volaire, and they were saying very similar things about, like, yeah, you could focus on the pros, but that's just such a small piece of the market. And instead they're focusing on the rec players and those like everyday people and putting out products for them and just really focusing on them. Um, how what made you and AJ think of going into pickleball? Like, do you
Yeah.
remember when that
Well,
idea
I
came?
remember when we were presenting to Jeff. I remember it was in our deck, like, and maybe we'll do pickleball someday, just to, like, throw that out there, like, hey, this is a sport that's growing. Our vendors and our R&D team, that they can all do. It's the same stuff, it's the same materials, it's the same processes, it's the same vendors. So it's obviously was within our wheelhouse. Our first step was we put in a pickleball court out back, and we started playing, and we started to see, hey, is this uh, you know does this have the potential? Because at that time there was some thoughts that were against pickleball. One, a lot of people were complaining. We were tennis players, right? And in general, tennis players are kind of like anti pickleball until you get into pickleball. You're like, this noise, it's too easy. I've been training for 15 years, 20 years, 30 years to get where I am, and now you're telling me I can pick up pickleball and be as good as anyone that's ever played. It's like, this isn't fair. So And then the sound, and then, even me initially, just on a pure business side, I was thinking, okay, so we sell them a paddle, and they don't need to they don't need to restring it. They only need one. We're never going to see them again. How's this going to work? And what we started to find as we were playing, as we were out there on the courts, there's so many local courts here in South Florida and so many clubs doing it. We started to realize, you open up someone's bag, they don't have one paddle. They have five paddles. And what's unique in pickleball compared to tennis, that their bag would have five tennis rackets, all exactly the same, of course, because you don't want to mess with that. In these bags, pickleball bags, there were five different paddles because everyone's one coming up with new stuff all the time. The sport's, you know, uh, changing so quickly with the technology of the paddles and the equipment and all that, that there's always something new and exciting. But also, people could literally use a paddle for singles, a paddle for doubles, a paddle when it's windy, a paddle when they're tired, a paddle that looks cool, that doesn't look cool, whatever. So I started to think, well, wait a second. I mean, if we can be selling multiple paddles to the same person, and the sport is growing like crazy, where there's millions of people pouring in, there's a huge opportunity there. So we fell in love with the way that the sport was in terms of playing. I started playing some tournaments. I was playing quite a bit early on. Was able to test some of our early products for quite a while as we were trying to enter the market with a product what was with our Icon paddle, which is very similar to how we constructed a tennis racket. So the same factory that made our tennis racket made that. It was a molded construction. We had foam around the outside, just like we did in our rackets. So it was really cool to kind of just basically make, in our mind, a tennis version of a pickleball paddle, and played great. And all of a sudden we realized there's all these new shops opening up. There was a huge demand for paddles, and so we were able to kind of quickly expand the line and reach a lot of people really quickly. And so, yeah, I mean, that it was it started slow, in terms of like, do we want to do pickleball? And then as soon as we decided and played it a little bit, we're like, yeah, we're all in. And that's been a huge part of our business the last year and a half.
Yeah. Given Diadem started in 2019, right before COVID, like what changes did you have to make against that economic climate that you could later turn into a lesson for the
Yeah,
future?
so I mean, we technically started in 2015. In 2019 was kind of that transition year with our partner bringing him in, and then us going from literally just me and AJ to, a couple employees, and then starting to hire employees around that time. So right when COVID started, we had actually just hired two full-time salespeople. Like our first salespeople, trained them, got them ready to go out there and do kind of the plan we had done. Work with the high school coaches, the stringers, the teaching pros, and then try to build up into the clubs and pro shops and all that stuff. And literally COVID hit, and it's like, all right, we're working from home. And again, that was our opportunity to work harder than all the other brands. I remember being at home. I took my whole setup. I went home, back to where I started just a year, 6 months before that, right? And I'm there, and everyone that we had was working from home, and we would have meetings every day. Okay, let's data mine, let's find these coaches, these facilities, and then let's reach out to them. Let's contact them and say, hey, I know you guys are shut down. I know it's crazy right now, but just want to let you know we're here when you're ready. When we get back going, we know we're going to get through this. We'll be there. We would just send a message. We would just keep everyone kind of in the loop of what's going on. And when people started to go back on the courts, which was actually before kind of the world even opened up, because people realized, hey, we can go play tennis, man. I mean, we're all the way on the other side of the court as people. And so, like, teaching pros are getting back out there on public courts where they could get to. And at that time, Wilson, Babolat, Head, all these legacy brands, I mean, they're shut down. They are completely shut down. They've canceled all their orders. Nobody's working from home. They just weren't working. You couldn't get a hold of Wilson if your life depended on it. So who was there? Who did they remember messaged them? We were just hitting these guys over and over. Hey, you need something. You need something. You need something. And they go, hey, I need balls, man. I mean, people are dying to play tennis. Well, we got balls. Let's go. And so, you know, for us, COVID actually, was a big push forward for us to get kind of known, because we were the only ones providing anything for about a month and a half before those guys started to, that slow turn of those big brands started to kind of get back into it. And by that time, we had taken a lot of customers because we were there when people needed them. And so for us, that was kind of a big turning point in the brand, and especially with introducing balls, because we had just invested a ton of money to bring in balls. The first time we had balls was like right before COVID happened, and now we couldn't produce enough balls, to meet the demand. So it was a big turning point for us.
Yeah, I think like a lot of things in life are just like cyclical and there's always waves, there's always these ups and downs. So how did you keep that momentum? Like you had that lead when you said
Right.
you were saying these companies shut down, y'all stayed open, like had that lead, that leeway like a month and a half. How do
Yeah,
you
I
keep that?
mean, a lot of it was what I had mentioned earlier, luck, right? I mean, it was luck, but like, who was the one messaging when everyone else is at home doing nothing? Who was the one still purchasing? We were still ordering while every other vendor literally in the world was like, we can't order. We don't know what's going to happen. Like, we were keeping our orders going. We were paying the employees still. We were paying our vendors still. You know what I mean? So we just kept pushing like everything was going to be okay. And I mean, I guess that was a risk, but in our defense, it worked. And so when now a month goes by and Wilson's back open, but now a couple months go by and nobody has product because they had canceled all of their orders, right? I mean, there was nothing moving, no boats were moving, nothing, and here's us still receiving product. And at the same time, what's kind of unique about us is because we're growing so quickly during then and still now, we're ordering not for what we need today. Wilson, big brands, it's just in time, right? They know they're going to sell 1,000 rackets this week. They're ordering 1,000 rackets. We are growing, so we're ordering usually 3x what we need today. We order because we assume in a year or 6 months we're going to need that. So we have more stock than what we actually need for what we're selling on a month to month basis. And so we still had product even if the boats weren't moving and the product wasn't being produced. And so we just always sit down and we come up with a plan each month, for the next month, what are we going to focus on? And so when we had an excess at that time of, say, balls, it's like, hey, we know there is a demand for balls out there. People are playing more tennis than ever before. More balls are going to be needed, and there's less balls on the market from all the legacy brands. So we were focusing on, reaching out to these clubs, tournaments, facilities. Let's get them balls. Let's introduce our brand in the way of balls. And that was kind of what we did for the rest of that first COVID year, was just really focus on balls. And we started getting messages all the time. Man, I picked up this ball on the court and I saw it was Diadem. I never heard of it. I looked you guys up and I'm calling you now. Like, who are you guys? I've never seen your brand. I didn't know someone could just make a ball. And by the way, it was a great ball. So I'm calling you. And so we were getting a lot of inbound calls. We were doing a lot of outbound calls, and we were just kind of building these what we like to call building this engine where we have a plan and it's just something we can scale up. You call 10 coaches today, you call 10 coaches tomorrow, you call 10 coaches, the next thing you know, you've called 30 coaches and a couple of them start buying and it just starts to snowball. And so we just kept doing that during the time when everyone was kind of struggling to get product, and that struggle to get product only got worse with all the issues with the cost to import products, the delays because there's COVID still going on and the factories are shutting down. And so we were able to just manage it because we expected it. And so we were buying more than what we needed. We were paying the $30,000 to bring in a container of balls when it used to be two. We were just dealing with it, and we were just using this opportunity when everyone else was pulling back because they have to manage their costs because they're a big corporation. And if they're worried about, the bottom line, for us, we don't really worry about that for the most part. We just worry about our top line revenue, growing the business, top of mind awareness. And so that's what we just kept doing.
Will we see a Diadem Pickleball?
In about a month.
Heard it here first.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
a
hopefully it'll hear
tournament
first.
USAPA approved pickleball, the power Pickleball will launch in about a month. And so, yeah, we're super excited for that. We do have a ball now. It's more of like a training ball, and that's how it's sold. And so some people like it in terms of like putting it in their basket, more of a rec ball. But this ball will be one that we're aggressively pushing to tournaments, facilities, things like that, to kind of as an alternative to like the Dura or the X40.
That's awesome. That's super
Yeah,
exciting. I think a lot of people are tired of just seeing those
yeah.
two,
Yeah, and we
this
think it'll
Dura and the
offer,
French.
great playability. Of course, the key is, can you make a ball more durable? That's still fast and hard. And I mean, this is a compound that we were working on for a long time, so we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's definitely one huge benefit when you have one brand that came from tennis and pickleball, two similar sports, that there is some
Yeah,
like overlap, and being able to benefit from the technology and the experience. Um, like I keep hearing this, like how I don't know if it's necessarily a marketing strategy, but you reach out to facilities and coaches in the tennis realm as far as like getting them equipment. Um, are you using that same strategy in pickleball? I'm not sure if that infrastructure is
yeah.
similar.
It
So
is, and we have. I mean, it's a little different, and we've kind of adapted it as we've gone along. But yeah, I mean, especially initially, um, we definitely did. I think there's a lot less coaches in the pickleball world. Whereas in tennis, I mean, like if you're a you know PTR or US PTA certified, I mean, you may be coaching for 15, 30 years, and there's a lot of respect that comes with that. And if you're repping our brand and you're a big fan of our brand, it's gonna get to a lot of people, and they're gonna respect that and trust that. In pickleball, there's a lot of teaching pros that are brand new. They started yesterday, right? And they do command some respect because maybe they're a great player or they understand the game, but we definitely are careful of what the negative term is, like a trunk dealer. So we don't want like people to think like, oh, okay, you can get this like paddle under the you know behind the scenes, get it cheaper, and uh, maybe it doesn't seem like it's as legit. So most of our sales in pickleball do go through our great partners on the retail side. So whether it's a club that has a pro shop, or there's a lot of just brick and mortar pickleball stores, or half pickleball, half tennis, say, and then some of the big online retailers. So, and what is also a little bit unique about pickleball is there's a large demand for direct to consumer. So we do a significant business on our website in the pickleball side. We do it for tennis as well, but I mean it's like 90% pickleball on our website, 10% tennis maybe, because tennis is just you gotta demo the racket for a while. You gotta see a few people use it. You gotta have your coach give you the okay. Whereas pickleball, you might have a 55-year-old guy that's just like, hey, I want a pickleball paddle, I'm gonna go buy one, and they don't need to listen to anybody, or they can just go figure it out on their own. So they do that, and they'll buy on our website directly from us.
gotcha. Um, where's the focus now? Like you mentioned the ball, which is happening in like a month. I see ambassadors, people pushing the paddles, which is great. I have a couple friends that are doing it, and I know multiple people who have been using the Warrior. I know people who have used the Icon in the past. You're starting to see it pop up in tournaments. Like, what's the focus for Diadem right now?
Well, I mean, I think on the pickleball side, it's just continuing to come out with great product. We um, really happy with the product we have, but we also understand, and right as soon as we put it out, we're already developing the next version. So in 2023, we will have the Icon V2, the Warrior V2, and the Warrior Edge V2 all launching. And in the tennis world, we're on basically a 3-year cycle of the next generation of rackets. So every 3 years, we'll come out with a new version of that racket. So we just launched in January the Elevate V3, which has been 3 years since the last one. But in the pickleball, we're more on like a year and a half cycle, and that's just because the demand for the new technology, just the new technology that we're coming out with is just rapidly changing. Whereas in tennis, we're tweaking, fine tuning little things. Really, the rackets haven't had that much change to them in the last, say, 15 years in tennis. Whereas pickleball, a paddle that's 5 years old is just completely irrelevant, basically, at this point. They're using, probably a glass fiber face and, a cheap honeycomb and, a crappy edge guard and things like that. So we're really gearing our pickleball towards a molded construction like the Icon was, and like our tennis rackets, much more durable, no dead spots. We're, implementing different types of materials in the core, like, our Vice paddle that's not approved, but it's an amazing paddle, and we're taking some of that technology and putting it into our approved paddles. Um, so in the pickleball side, we're definitely, our focus is just great product. We do have a few pros. We're really excited about Christian Alshon. I don't know if you've seen him play, but he is actually a player I used to coach in tennis as a junior, and he was starting to play a little bit. And James Ignatowich is another kid I used to coach that I used to play a ton of pickleball with when I was like, dude, you got to do pickleball. You got to do pickleball. And we kind of did the same thing with Christian, and he fell in love with it. Met a lot of people that really, were pushing him, and he made the decision to go full pickleball. And from his first basically his first pickleball hit, he was using a Diadem, and so we were able to, he's a loyal guy, he's a good guy, and we were able to kind of build this plan around him, and we hope that in the next few months he can really, continue to improve his success. I mean, he's got some good wins, but once he starts getting those gold medals, and people are already starting to recognize him and know him, he does a great job with social media content as well. But once he can get some titles under his belt, I'd love to make him a signature paddle and build around his needs. But so that's kind of the pickleball side. On the tennis side, we're trying to just continue to get our ball out there, get our brand recognition. I think in the pickleball side, a lot of people know who we are. In the tennis side, it's not as many as we'd like. There's definitely people around the world who have never heard of Diadem, and there's a lot of people who maybe have heard of it but have never tried a product. So our goal is just brand awareness on the tennis side. We have a significant amount of products coming out over the next few years. But it's about building partnerships with some of our distributors around the world. We got a really good team in Japan that we're going to visit here in a couple weeks. So just building the brand awareness there. Our Europe team is doing a great job. And it's just about how many people can we get to touch Diadem for the first time. And balls has historically been a great way to do that, because it's very easy to try buy a can of 3 balls or use it in a tournament that you're forced to use, and now you get your first interaction with Diadem.
Absolutely. It's really exciting. Back to Christian Alshon. He's definitely got a lot of traction behind him right now, and rightfully so. But as far as like selecting pros, we see that very often with a lot of brands in the pickleball side right now, is like sponsoring pros. What goes through, maybe you're responsible for this decision, maybe it's someone else, but like what goes through your mind when you want someone to represent Diadem and what Diadem also
Yeah,
represents?
and we've talked to a few on the tennis side as well, and haven't really pulled the trigger on like a big name guy. And in pickleball, we had the Johnson brothers in 2022, and we decided to, kind of focus on Christian for 2023. We're not going to bring on 20 guys, and pay them. We are, paying Christian and supporting him, and helping him achieve his goals. That's kind of like our mindset. We want to help you achieve your goals, and obviously if he achieves his goals, it's great for us too. What we looked for, um of course, was somebody that kind of like us, that we feel was going to go in there and disrupt a little bit. I'm not looking for the guy that's been around for 5 years. They're obviously going to want probably more money than they're worth, because there's people willing to pay a lot for them. But also, we feel like a guy like Christian. I know him very well. I know his athletic ability, but beyond that, I know his competitiveness. I used to play cross court tennis points with him. He wouldn't play us unless it's for $10. You want to play me? It's $10. I mean, this is when he's 14 years old. So we had to literally put our money on the table, and oftentimes he would beat us because, when he can isolate to his strengths, he's literally was unbeatable. He was a top junior. I mean, from 12 to 14 to 16, was number one in the country. He had a few uh, deficiencies in his backhand side serve. Maybe, I mean, he might see this podcast and he'll completely agree. And in pickleball, he can completely protect any deficiency he does have, which I don't think he even has one. I think it's just about he needs to continue to play more, get used to, what the other top pros are doing. I mean, he's beaten several of them, but I mean, like a guy like Ben Johns, he knows that last match yesterday, he knew how to beat Christian and he executed it, and Christian couldn't stop it. I think in the future he will, but what we looked for in Christian was somebody that's going to have the passion, somebody that's going to disrupt, somebody that's going to do something their own way, which is going to be, also tied to Diadem's way. We'll feed off each other, and kind of disrupt the current mold of what maybe a pickleball pro is. The other great thing about Christian is he's really dedicated to his social media presence, his vlogs, podcasting, all that stuff, and so it's kind of like getting a little bit of double benefit in the pickleball scene. The forums, the videos, all that stuff is the age that we're in, and that's the age that pickleball's starting. It's what people want. You can't just be a great pro and people are just going to know who you are. You need to kind of put that content out there, and he does a really, really good job with that. He's a very confident kid, and we like that. We want him to, you know, come at people, like be aggressive towards someone in a mat. Like that's that passion that Diadem is and that he is. And so for us, it was a really good match, and I'm really excited to see what he does this year. And I mean, we'll always look for pros like that, pros that are going to be, somebody that we can build a brand around. So for him, I mean, I hope that we can build a brand of a paddle around him. One of our paddles, could be his line in the future. And hopefully we could do that with other people as well.
Yeah, that passion is a very like critical component to the success of the sport, or at least getting more
Yep.
eyes on the sport. I think a lot of players, maybe it's just because I come from MMA, but like I feel like a lot of players don't really have super exciting stories, so they need to find a way to put make a story on the court. Um, that's definitely very
Yeah.
exciting stuff as far as what you see with Christian and that partnership. What do you now that Diadem's been in the industry, pickleball industry for a few years now? What is the biggest challenge that you're seeing right now?
That's a good question. I think there is definitely a challenge with the amount of brands out there. I think that in a way it's creating a bit of almost like a stigma, are we considered a big brand or a small brand? If you're considered a small brand, well, there's a million brands. So like, what's different from you? What's differentiating your product? I think a lot of people understand what differentiates us, and I think a lot of people would see us as a bigger brand, but still all these brands in there that are kind of almost muddying the water, that are copying and just producing. I mean, there's a couple brands out there that have literally exactly copied our paddles, and while it's a little bit flattering, sure, it's just like there's gets to be this like, well, I'm on this team, so I'm against that team, and a lot of negativity. Social media, there's a lot of negativity. I mean, negativity sells on social media. If you produce a video like you're doing this video and it's kind of just like, hey, let's see what the journey is. I mean, if you did a video of a hit piece on us, you'd probably get more views. Now please don't do that, but negativity kind of sells. And so it's just kind of fighting that a little bit, trying to just make sure that people understand who we are and what our brand is about, which is, there is no negativity. It's just about growing the sport. It's about building a team in an environment where you're excited to play with our paddles or our equipment and stuff like that. So I would say all the brands, the negativity is really the only challenge. For us, like the supply chain, the development, all that stuff is going well. We've really navigated that in a way that's probably better than some of our competitors, and it's given us that advantage. And there's so much growth that it's almost like you can't go wrong sometimes in the path you take. There's so many new facilities opening. There's so many new stores opening. There's so many new players playing. Um, Surprisingly, maybe the one challenge that just pickleball overall is facing is a lack of courts. Like, we don't really see it here in South Florida because there are a lot of courts, and even though there is a lot, there could be more. You go to any park, there's 50 people waiting to play on like a Saturday morning. But we know in a lot of communities around the country, there's a definite need for more courts, like real pickleball courts, not drawing a line on a tennis court or a floor of a gym. So in general, I would say for us, challenges, we're meeting them and we're moving past them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can definitely attest to the lack of infrastructure as far as pickleball
Yeah.
courts. I'm in Austin,
Okay.
Texas. We have a huge community, but like Dreamland, that's really like 30 minutes out. And I think a lot of people in Austin are kind of spoiled as far as the commute goes. So a lot of people don't really want to make that trek. And there were some ideas floating around of people buying out large properties and putting down like 36 courts, just never came to fruition. And it's exactly what you said. People are just like painting lines on tennis courts. There are very few dedicated pickleball courts. So, yeah, if anyone is looking to build a facility, come to
Yeah, yeah,
Austin.
I know. I mean, there's definitely gonna be facilities being built. There's a lot in the works. I mean, when you're building one from scratch, it costs a lot of money, obviously. And is that land better used to build an apartment complex? That's what people are faced with. So, I think turning um, tennis facilities that maybe have an excess amount of tennis courts and could spare some for pickleball. A lot of the parks and facilities here, there for some reason there was a lot of like roller rinks here, like outdoor like roller rinks that I don't think were being used. So those in all the parks have been turned into pickleball. They were turning some basketball courts in, which basketball courts get used pretty well, but there's more demand for pickleball right now.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned the roller rinks because there's like this surface. There's three dedicated pickleball courts, and there's like the other half of it is people doing rollerblading, and they cut it off and they have like dedicated groups for that. People playing futsal.
Wow.
Um, it's crazy. And these are like the surface isn't even
Yeah.
painted. It's like slippery courts, and it's probably the most popular courts in Austin as far as like close to downtown. Um, you've gone from being a founder to now, like at the director level, leadership. What is your focus now in your role? I think a lot of founders sometimes miss the excitement and like kind of discovering a lot of things and having that like entrepreneurial, I guess, like path very early on. Like, how has that changed for you as far as what you're doing in your day to day
Yeah, I mean,
operations?
I'm still very much involved in like a lot of aspects. We're still a pretty small crew. We probably have at this point like 35 in-house employees, which for a few years ago seems like an incredible amount, but it's like it isn't that much really when you think about it and all the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going through hundreds of emails a day just from helping out with customer service at times to taking inbound leads, and then I'm involved still primarily doing a lot of the product development with our R&D team. um, what we always want to do as long as we still can is the final kind of process is always going to go through me and AJ. We're still able to go out when he was in town the other day and we went and prototyped, tested some rackets, some paddles like that. Like, we still play enough that we feel we can kind of understand, is this paddle or racket going to be right for the consumer we're making it for. I mean, you can give rackets to a top pro, but what does that top pro know about a 7-year-old girl? And maybe what do I know about a 7-year-old girl? But I've coached them, I've developed them, and stuff. So I still feel like we have a pretty good understanding, and so we're really involved with that. My main kind of focus has been, of course, logistics, operations, the stuff, the ordering coming in, the ordering going out, all that. And we're kind of just, as we grow, we segment off pieces that an employee we can hire can take, and that's a full-time job. Like everything was with like a couple of us, and as we grow, it's like, okay, now this is a full-time job. Now this is a full-time job. But often I keep going with that much longer than I wish I had to, right? Like I'm doing, still 7 full-time jobs. And as we can kind of piece them off, it opens up and there's always seems to be more work. So I'm very much involved in a lot of things within the business. I would say that my main focus day to day is just, ordering products. I mean, we have so many, we have like 2,000 SKUs now. So I mean, it's a constant, understanding of what vendor we're at, what the pricing is, what the lead times are. Lead times fluctuate. One day it seems like a lead time for, say, a string is 3 months, and all of a sudden it's 9 months. And so you kind of have to manage that. There's no software formula that can do that because we have so many moving parts in the way that the world is now. Usually you'd be like, okay, when you're down to this stock, the system says order more. Well, you can't really do it that way because the lead times are so long, the minimums, and then of course always coming out with new products. There's all this new development that we constantly have to do and understand that timeline. So just a lot of things going on for me on a day-to-day basis, which is great. I obviously love coming to work. I'm here usually between 5 and 6, and leave the end of the day. So it's a lot of fun. And like I said earlier, we have very, very big goals. So where we're at right now is not where we're stopping. We're setting all these massive goals, and so to get there, we have to continue to do basically the work of a company a couple size larger than we are now.
Yeah, as a player, as a customer, that's definitely very refreshing to hear that you sometimes take part in customer service. That's a small team that it kind of goes back to what you were saying before about just like grassroots, but also the fact that you and AJ both test the product and are very involved in product development. I think it speaks to consistency, but also knowledge and experience. Like you're not just handing that off to someone else. It's like, look, we founded the company based on these principles, and we want to, and it's nice to see that that's being carried through up until like up until inception to where we are
Yeah.
now. Um, so you have a family now. What piece of advice do you have for a founder who has a family that sometimes doesn't know or has hesitations about work-life balance?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I was lucky that I didn't have a family when I was starting it, and there was no work-life balance. It was just work. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I make time for my family. I have a 8-month, almost 9-month-old daughter, so I mean, I'm excited for her to be able to walk, to grab a tennis racket, get on court with her, pickleball, all that stuff. But you know, my wife is very supportive. She understands what we're trying to do here. She's seen a lot of, from the early on to now, and the growth and what it takes. At the end of the day, you still have to make the effort to work harder than any competitor that you're trying to catch up to. If there's somebody that already has an established company that you're trying to compete with, which is probably going to happen if you're founding a company, then what are you doing to catch up to them? So and it could be just work smarter even too. I mean, not only I feel like do everybody in the organization pretty much work hard in terms of they're there for the hours they need to be, but there's not a lot of wasted time. Sure, we have a great little like group of guys and girls, and we have an indoor hitting lane here. We're always doing fun stuff. We have lunches, and everyone loves sports here. We're always doing games and all that. But like when they're coming in, sitting down and grinding, I mean, they're not just like watching TV on the side, looking at their phone. I mean, I've been around. I mean, I know these guys are all passionate. We're like kicking ass, working hard. It's not just to waste time. Everybody is kind of on the same trajectory of what we're trying to do. So, even if you are working part time on like some new venture, like what are you doing with those hours that you're spending? Are you, just casual about it, or are you like multitasking? I don't know how many screens I have open on my screens here, but I mean, I'm doing a million things at once, and you just got to be able to manage that. You got to be super organized. But I'm always going to go back to you got to work hard. Just like when you're training tennis. I mean, you can go out there and play for 7. We had kids that trained 7 hours a day, and we had kids that trained 3 hours. But those 3 hours were a lot harder, a lot more effort, a lot more energy than those 7. And those kids that were doing the 3, working harder, we're probably a lot further ahead. And so, but you're never going to catch up to Roger Federer if you're not working as hard or harder than him and put that effort and time in. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
I don't know, man. That's a tough one. I do remember, laying in bed at night early on before we even got this going, where I didn't think this could happen, and I was just thinking, how am I going to make money? What if I did this? What if I did that? What if I did this? So I'm sure I would be doing something else, where I'm owning my own business and running it. I never really have worked for anybody. I did obviously some small part-time jobs early on, but then I got into coaching, and it was my life, my business. My parents had their own business, so I think I probably couldn't take orders from somebody and say like, hey, you need to be here, you need to wear this suit, you need to be here at this time. Like, I don't think that would work. So I'm sure I would just be doing something else. I don't think I would have lasted coaching. I think it's a grind, and there's so many factors that determine if you're good. I mean, you look at all the great coaches, like they also had great players, like any sport, right? I mean, there's no great coach that achieved greatness and all their players sucked, right? So all the players that they had were good. So you also got to have the right players, the right family supporting those players, and it was a lot. And so I think I would just be in some business grinding away.
Yeah. What's This is the last question, but what is the most important piece of advice you would have for someone who wants to successfully create a business in pickleball?
Well, I think in pickleball at this stage, you definitely need to decide what you're doing to differentiate yourself, because there are literally 500 brands. So what are you going to do to make it that your paddle or your service, whatever it is, that is different than anyone else? I do think if you really wanted to get in pickleball and you didn't have that, open up a facility that's fun and exciting in an area that it needs to be, because there's definitely a need for more courts. And so that would be the probably the easiest way. It'll take obviously some capital. If you wanted to start, a brand that's creating products, you need to figure out what's going to make them different, because there's just so many of the same out there. And I think the general consumer would be very interested in something that's new, exciting, and better.
Yeah. So now giving you an opportunity to plug away, like where can people find you? What's next for Diadem?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, diademsports.com is our website. You can go to any of our social medias at Diadem Sports, but pretty much any store, any shop that carries pickleball, um, carries us. And if they don't, then please go in there and ask them, why are you not carrying Diadem, and then we'll get in there. Um, for us, just keep your eyes peeled. We got new products coming out in March, April, May, June, a lot of exciting things. So we'll be teasing stuff out. We'll be, letting people know as we get closer to each of those launches. And some of the stuff is very, very good, and it's going to change. Um, it's going to change the way the game's played a little bit. And I hate to say it like that, because everyone kind of has that pitch when they say stuff, but started with the Vice and what we did at Diacon. That technology that some people love, some people thinks anti pickleball, but what we've learned is going into the paddles we're launching this year, and that's what was the whole point of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for your time, Evan, today. Thanks for joining us, sharing your insights and experience as a founder, and hopefully helping others who wish to build a business in this sport as well. Find us on Instagram and YouTube at Building Pickleball.
All
Yeah,
right.
thanks
All right.
again.
Thank you, man.